So one of the benefits of getting to start my career at Goldman Sachs before going off to a top VC firm and then Stanford Business School is that I got years of an inside look into how the most successful billion-dollar companies actually got to the top. And I'd actually argue that that's one of the reasons why my own startup has been so strong out of the gates, where we've grown from zero to $30 million in just 2 years because I've been able to pattern match between what we're going through and all of the insights I've gleaned from all of these much more successful companies. And now it's my time to pay it forward, because by the end of this video, I'm gonna take everything that I've learned and give it to you so that you can start just running straight out of the gate and find success in your own business. And I'm gonna do so by going through a list of all of these companies and sharing the key insight they use to get off the ground. And my favorite one to start with is actually TikTok, because they use this super clever strategy to go from this app called Musical.ly that was honestly super cringe and no one wanted to use into this app now that we call TikTok that we are all super addicted to and literally defines our culture. And they did so by using this really clever mental model based around the idea that starting a new product is kind of like colonizing a new land. So basically, if you think about the earliest days of TikTok as if TikTok was America and then Instagram was Europe, if you think about it, when America was first discovered, no one really thought or wanted to move to this new deserted land. And so how do you think about convincing people who already have an established system and life in one place to actually even think about caring about moving and uprooting their entire lives over to a new plot of land? Well, you give them wealth, AKA you offer them a ton of free land to start a new life. And this ends up being really interesting to the middle or lower classes of a society where they're already in an established system with very little possibility of upwards mobility. And so what TikTok did was recognize that one of the new forms of wealth in today's society is actually social capital. And that by convincing a couple people to come over here and to selectively drive and concentrate wealth and fame their way, AKA they would literally just drive millions of followers to Charli D'Amelio and Addison Rae, people back in the old land would hear about all of this wealth and fame coming to these people who actually took the risk to move onto a new platform and say, wait, I want some upward social mobility, like I'm gonna migrate over here and try this out. Like TikTok literally manufactured or created this new gold rush almost out of thin air. And this here example unlocks the key insight behind all of the strategies I'm about to share with you today, which are based upon the realization that not many people realize, I think, when they first get started building a business, that most startups actually die not because of competition or because of a lack of a great product or what have you. They die due to complete indifference. Because most startup ideas actually aren't bad ideas. It's just a function of getting people to actually care about your idea and change their behavior and take a bet on your product. AKA, getting your business off of the ground is all about getting distribution, which is so important when you think about the number one strategy behind why TikTok is so powerful today, which are its network effects, where TikTok today actually gets better as a product as more and more people join, because more and more people means more and more content and more likes and comments and engagements for all of the creators, where eventually over time, you just have a flywheel where more and more people are creating more and more content for us to consume and enjoy, and the content through competition keeps getting better. And this same concept applies to Instagram and Facebook and why they are such behemoths of businesses, because they have this massive business moat of a network. But here's the thing. If network effects are so powerful, why aren't they in every single business? Like obviously you want network effects in your business. And it's because if you think about it, bootstrapping a network to actually pop off is really difficult to do. It's kind of like a chicken or egg problem where the network isn't valuable until everyone's on it, but how do you get everyone on it in the first place? It's basically what people call the cold start problem. And so I'll give you a couple other really clever examples of how some other billion-dollar businesses actually managed to hack their way to network effects. And I'll start actually with Tinder, where if you think about it, Tinder isn't very fun if you're just the only one on the app. Like there's no one to swipe. And so you have to collectively get society to buy into this concept of a dating app so that there's a network of people that you can slide into the DMs of. And so back in the day when they first launched Tinder, they did this really clever idea where they would just go to college campuses and they'd be like, well, what do college kids love to do? They love to party. Let's just throw these bangers of events where we give out a ton of free booze or just have the coolest party ever. But your entry ticket into actually getting into this party was by downloading Tinder. And so they'd have these flocks of pubescent, eager college students coming into this party, obviously already excited to meet a significant other, now downloading a dating app and creating critical mass and density in this specific network, which is a super different tactic than apps like Gmail or Clubhouse use to get to millions of members, where they actually built hype for the network by using an invite-only exclusivity tactic, where we all remember begging our friends for a Clubhouse invite because we really wanted to get on, which built a ton of hype to get everyone collectively on at the same time to actually use Clubhouse and build the network. And that is a really different tactic than how Uber built its $100 billion network, where they were actually just a lot more brute force. Where back in the day, I'm sure you guys remember, we'd all just get a bunch of these free $10, $15 credits to use Uber if our friend invited us onto the network and we started writing. And it was the same for PayPal, Venmo, and Dropbox all back in the day. It's kind of like the ultimate chain text. And so the key insight here is for you to think about what kind of hook can I provide people so that they will actually go through the effort of joining, which leads us to the next strategy that I really love, which is the entry wedge. Where if you think about Facebook way back in the day, there was already Friendster or MySpace and a ton of other social networks that one could use. And so Facebook's entry wedge into the social networking sphere was to insert themselves specifically within the college demographic, where Mark Zuckerberg was actually super intentional about first driving an entry wedge into just Harvard and building extreme network density and hype there, before then expanding to adjacent networks in the Ivy Leagues, before even thinking about expanding to the next level, which was high school students, and then eventually the entire world's population. But this concept of an entry wedge doesn't just apply to social media apps. Like, think about Amazon and Daddy Bezos. Amazon today is worth $1.8 trillion, but it started out as just an online bookstore. And this is because Bezos was super prescient back in the day, where he had this insight that eventually all commerce would move online. But he knew that logistically or operationally, he couldn't build a business that immediately just sold everything everywhere all at once. Instead, he asked himself, what is my entry wedge of a product category that just can actually fundamentally be better served online than in person? Which for him, as the book nerd that he was back in the day, realized, wait a minute, no physical bookstore can actually serve the entire collection of all the different books that I want. And so that's actually where I should start. Because then from there, he jumped from his entry wedge of books into related and expanding product categories. So like CDs, DVDs, and then skincare. And then all of a sudden, all of e-commerce, and now our entire lives are run by Amazon. And that's super different to another billion-dollar business that we all actually probably spend too much time browsing, which is Zillow. And the reason why is because Zillow has this really clever hook, which is that the founders of Zillow recognize that within all of us in our innate human nature is the desire to browse and gossip. And so they built this innovative concept of a Zestimate, where you could go out and check how much was your neighbor's house worth, or how much is that incredible dream mansion that you'd love to live in Malibu worth. So Zillow hooks you in with this really fun and clever mechanic so that eventually when you are actually going out and trying to buy a house, you choose to browse their network. And so this concept of an entry wedge is kind of like a, hey, hi, like let me get my foot in the door. Because that then sets you up for the next strategy, which is to land and expand. And I think the company that runs this playbook the best is actually Salesforce, who not only has built a $300 billion software company, but has also erected a literal in the SF skyline, which if you think about is wild that we live in this reality where one can write some code and then eventually afford a massive skyscraper. But the key lesson to learn in this Salesforce story is that Salesforce started with just one software product. It was a customer relationship management piece of software, so a CRM, which every business needs in order to keep track of all of their customer data. And so you casually go adopt Salesforce, but they know that in the back of their minds, not only are they going to sell you the CRM service, but eventually you're also going to need an email marketing system that talks to that CRM service, or you're also going to need a company messaging service that also interacts with that CRM service. And so Salesforce has gone out and strategically acquired a bunch of other tangential products, knowing that they can upsell you over time, aka land and expand, to actually make more and more money off of their customers over time. Now, one of the reasons why Salesforce has grown as large as it has is because it actually has an army of people who don't even work for Salesforce selling Salesforce to the market. And this tactic is part of our next insight, which is community-driven distribution. Basically, you could spend all day trying to sell your product alone and hustle on back-to-back cold calls and emails and sales demos. But at the end of the day, at best, you're gonna make 10 or 20 sales. But if you had 100 or 1,000 people helping you sell your product, you're just fundamentally going to make more sales. And so you wanna ask this question for your business, which is, who are the efficient aggregators of demand? And I'll explain what I mean by that by giving the example of Eventbrite, which we've all probably used to attend an event and purchase a ticket at some point. Where Eventbrite's initial wedge into the market was building the very best platform to host an event on. Because they knew if they could attract the best party planners and the best event hosters out there to use their product, those people would actually organically and naturally, through their use of the product itself, continue to distribute Eventbrite to new people. AKA, if you have that one friend who just loves hosting throw a party on Eventbrite, well then you're not just getting exposure for that person, you're getting exposure of Eventbrite to the 20 or 200 or 2,000 people attending that event. Which at some point means that when you're thinking about hosting a party or an event yourself, well, what do you know? You decide to use Eventbrite. And this is actually a really similar concept to a company like Slack, which got sold for $28 billion. Where if you can just convince one person in a company, let's say the IT manager, to adopt Slack within a company, well then naturally the way Slack works as a messaging app, you onboard the entire rest of that company. And then let's say someone leaves that company to start a new company or join a different company. Well, if they love using Slack, they're going to get the rest of that company to adopt Slack as well. And this leads us to a term that is the holy grail of business builders, which is the concept of product-led growth, where your product, in the usage of the product itself, actually grows the company for you. So if you think about it, there are actually a ton of different products that we all use in our day-to-day lives that we actually adopted through this mechanic, whether it be Zoom or Calendly or even Partyful. Now, I want to talk about Tesla and the strategy they use to dominate the electric vehicle market. Now, if you guys remember, the initial model for Tesla, the Roadster, was never really about being electric or going green. Like it was this brand new, splashy, six-figure sports car that was completely disrupting this boring old automotive market that was stuck in its ways. Like reading the excerpts of the initial Roadster critiques from Car and Driver, they would say things like, anyone who buys a Roadster will get the most satisfaction from smoking someone's doors off. And so what you realize that Tesla did in its mission to electrify the vehicle market was to actually start with an entry wedge at the very top of the market and appeal to the luxury market at the very top and what those people buy on in order to fund a mass marketification of electric vehicles over time. And what's crazy is Elon literally put the strategy from the get-go on their website, which I'll read it to you, which is our strategy is to enter at the high end of the market where customers are prepared to pay a premium and then drive down the market as fast as possible to higher unit volume and lower prices with each successive model. And so the Roadster was the entry wedge into Tesla, dominating the entire market. And so this example from Tesla hints at the next strategy you should think about for your business, which is that many of the most successful companies of all time democratize something for the masses. Basically, rich people have the most access to the resources and experiences that all of us want. And so you can build a business democratizing that to more people. So for example, you can build Robinhood, which democratized access for now anyone to trade stocks and buy and lose money on shitcoins and GameStop. Or if you even think about YouTube or TikTok, they're actually the democratization of fame in Hollywood, where now anyone can actually become a creator or a mini celebrity. And so there's this huge list of billion-dollar companies that have democratized some tool for the mass market, whether it be Canva for design, or Duolingo for language learning, or Shopify for starting an e-commerce business. And this is actually the core thesis of my startup Stan, where our mission is to empower anyone to get to work for themselves, to pursue building a business on social media as a creator entrepreneur. So the question for you to ask is, what is something that you believe everyone would love to have access to? And then go out and democratize that. And what's really cool about today's day and age is that you can actually go out and try to help underserved markets and still build a multi-billion-dollar business. Where I love giving the example of Chime, which is a $25 billion fintech app that had a mission of serving an underserved market of the unbanked. Where when you think about the fintech landscape of PayPal and Venmo and Square and every bank ever, you'd initially think it's probably not a great idea to try to start a new neo-bank. But what Chime recognized was that all of these incumbents were actually neglecting a huge part of the market and not actually serving them. And Chime could actually serve that portion of the market and give them access to the financial tools they need to succeed in their lives while also building a successful business for themselves. And now it's one of the hottest fintech companies out in the market. And the cool thing is, it's never been easier to target large, underserved markets. Like, remember how I mentioned that TikTok and YouTube democratize fame, which means they also democratize the most valuable resource and commodity out there today, which is people's attention. And when I mentioned before that most startups die because no one is paying attention to you or no one cares about you, you now have a way to cut above the noise and make a dent in this world by hacking distribution through social media. Where the best example I'd love to give here is Logan Paul and KSI's Prime, where very candidly, Prime is just kind of an okay drink. Like fundamentally on its own, it's not a billion-dollar business. What's driven Prime to generate $1 billion of sales already is the fact that Logan and KSI have already built a pre-built audience through which they can distribute their products. Because like Gary Vee said, he owns people's attention and therefore can immediately get distribution. And this is really just the same thesis in which Kim Kardashian used to build Skims into a company that's now going to go public for multiple billions of dollars. AKA, she used herself as the initial distribution channel. And this is so crucial when you think about how much is just going on in the world around us all the time. Like all the stressors, all the distractions, all the notifications. It is so crucial for your business to own its own distribution. Like you need to have a way to get people to care. And so you might be kicking back and saying, you know what, John, but I don't want to create content myself. I don't want to put myself online. Like, what should I do? And fortunately, if you don't want to use your own personality to distribute your business in the same way that Kim and Logan did, you can still take that same concept and apply it and find success through a network of creators who post on your behalf. Where if you study both Gymshark and Revolve, that are both multi-billion-dollar clothing companies, you'll see that they built their brand and their initial word of mouth and distribution through working with a network of creators and influencers. Where for Gymshark, basically nowadays, for any fitness influencer out there, it's almost a badge of honor to get to be sponsored by Gymshark. And for Revolve, they were actually super clever about how they built their initial hype. Where every year for Coachella, they throw this massive party called Revolve Fest that basically every celebrity ever tries to go to. And so the key insight here is that companies of our generation are no longer just product companies. They're often actually media companies that just so happen to sell a product. So all of this hard work to be said, what if I told you there was actually one last distribution strategy that leads to you not having to do any outbound work yourself, but instead have thousands or millions of people come to you and flood you for business? And that is through building this really abstract concept we call brand. Basically, no one really knows about your business. Like in your head, it's the number one thing you're thinking about, and you can see the vision of how incredible this product is or service is and how it can help all these different people. But outside of the four walls of your head, literally no one knows or cares about what you do. And so there are two components of brand that I want you to consider. The first building block is just people even knowing about you, like literally knowing that you exist and what you can do for them. And then number two, how much they like you, aka their propensity to buy from you. And I think the best example to walk through this is actually through the lens of the socks that I'm wearing right now. Where we all recognize this logo immediately, and as soon as you consider potentially purchasing any sort of fitness clothes, your subconscious says, oh, I should maybe consider Nike. But recognize there are probably thousands of fitness brands out there that you could have purchased from, but Nike takes so much of a bucket of your entire subconscious decision making. And how that shows up in these socks is how much more money you're willing to pay for these white socks with the logo on them versus if I just tried to sell you these same white socks without the same logo on them. And that starts to allude to the power of brand, where we'll go to the grocery store and you'll see the Kraft mac and cheese and the store brand mac and cheese, which the Kraft mac and cheese is literally $4 more. And it's both of these are from the same factory, it's the same product, but we will oftentimes still purchase the Kraft one because we just inherently know the brand and therefore trust it. It's not rational. And I think that's why so many tech founders especially really discount the power of brand. But the best way that I think about it is actually through the lens of this meme I'll put up here, which is that amateurs do sales, scalers do marketing, and experts do brand. Because if you build an exceptional brand that people know you for, they will literally just come to you in droves for business. It's just like the knowledge that you are the right person to solve their problems and the awareness that you exist that then leads them to go purchase from you. And so the last billion-dollar example that I'll give you won't be one of the first three names you'll probably think of, which is Apple, Nike, or Coca-Cola, but actually someone who I think is even better at building brand. And that is Red Bull. Because I've actually been interviewing a ton of folks from Red Bull lately because I think they are the best in the world at building brand. And the key insight I've learned from all of these interviews is that folks will say to me, John, in terms of how we think about brand here at Red Bull, it's to give people experiences that they can't have literally anywhere else. And so the reason why Red Bull invests literally billions of dollars into owning F1 teams and sponsoring super extreme sports and then literally sending someone to space is that it is such exceptional news or content that will actually get your attention is because I want you to think about all the times you've gone up to the bar and ordered a Red Bull vodka. Red Bull has literally never asked you to do that. But because you've consumed so much of their exceptional content and they've entered your psyche, you just did. And that is the power of brand. And so the last piece of advice I'll give you is to have a beginner's mindset, where the reason why I learned all these different patterns from all these different billion-dollar companies is because I was just voraciously consuming every piece of content I could get my hands on, whether it was a podcast or a book or a blog post. Basically, I was just so hungry to learn every method for success that I could then apply it to my own life. And so my hope is that you take what resonates with you and go out and crush it.
And make sure to subscribe.